it never surprised me, representing the constituency that I represent in East London, that, you know, when things developed and unfolded and have done for the last 75 years of occupation of Palestine, that people just stood up and just were organising straight away. You know, people were already getting the buckets out to raise money, people were already putting up the flags, people were coming out in such huge numbers at the demo and still continue to do. And I'm really, really proud of local people in my constituency and across East London that are continuing to stand up for what's right, continuing to organise, looking at existing strategies and ways to support the Palestinian people, but also looking at new ways in which we can do that. You know, we can always further our work, we can always learn from one another, we can always look back at what's not worked and what can work even better going forward. And I know I'm speaking at a time when it's been an incredibly momentous day, of course, for us in the UK as a British people, but also internationally as well. And I want to just say a few things about, you know, what today really means as a result of South Africa's, you know, post-apartheid South Africa's really, really brave, courageous move to take the case to the International Court of Justice. I think at the bare minimum, we have been at the bare minimum calling for an immediate ceasefire. And what I would say is that, you know, looking at the ICJ's ruling today, two things become very, very significant. Firstly, that in order to implement the ruling, in order to uphold the directions that have been given, really only an immediate ceasefire can achieve that and can achieve the protection of civilians. So our calls for an immediate ceasefire have to continue, but also have to grow louder and louder at this point as well. And the second thing that I took from the ruling so far is the absolute need to, particularly I think in the next few days and the week, to also increase our voices calling for an immediate suspension of arms sales to Israel. Because what the ICJ has said and the 30 days that it has given the State of Israel to report back they will in that period be looking at other actors and you know, the ongoing aiding and abetting of various state actors that are not that they have, you know, called for to stop, and you know, to ensure the protection of civilians and to uphold their ruling. So I think those two things are going to be. We can't also be. I think we can't take away from the fact that the death toll is obviously increasing and continuing to increase. And I think that's why these initiatives are really important. A lot of people keep coming to me as well and saying we feel despair, we feel despondent, we don't know what to do. And some of the actions that we have. I'd say a lot of experience on is important to consistently continue. So I do appreciate that this is an event that is, you know, bringing out hope for Palestine, but also doing that through fundraising as well. We're damn good at that in East London and beyond, and let's continue to do that. And you know, and I appreciate this is all happening at a time when the censorship is increasing, the smears are continuing, but let's not forget in East London and beyond, we have been there before. You know, the mainstream media, the political establishment attacked us when we said no to the war in Iraq, and we were right then and we're right now, and we're going to continue those voices. I'm obviously doing the work I possibly can in my role as a parliamentarian. Watch this space, there'll be more action, more calls on our government to change and shift direction, all political parties in the UK to make sure they support a ceasefire, and that's something that I'll continue to do. And I'll just end by saying this, I'm just going to share a quote from a Palestinian writer who was killed in the 70s, Ghassan Kanafani, something that just to leave you with a bit of hope, because I think part of our role is to amplify, share the Palestinian story, their culture, as we can see with the food today, their struggles, and you know, everything that makes their identity. And he said, you know, in the 70s before he died, that everything in this world can be robbed and stolen except one thing. And this one thing is the love that emanates from a human being towards a solid commitment to a conviction or cause. and that conviction and cause is going to be tested again and again over the next few days and over the next few weeks, and I hope we can all continue to stand together with that hope. Thank you so much. Solidarity and Salam Alaykum.
I'm too short. No, we have to say a massive thank you to Afsana. Jazakallah khair. There's not many politicians out there that are brave enough to do what Afsana and some of her colleagues. We need to push the rest of her colleagues in Parliament and beyond to stand on the right side of justice. We know too well that our politicians here make a big difference to those who are in Palestine and all over the world who are being attacked. The first part of tonight, we're going to have some key people come and have a discussion, a frank discussion about Palestine, what's happening from their experiences, people who've been on the ground. And I believe the second part, there'll be lots of cultural sort of events and stuff so you can take part in Palestine, the Palestinian culture and wider. And the only reason I'm mentioning this here is because right now, whilst we see the onslaught happening, one thing that we are doing is we're learning about Palestine. We're pulling flags up on our streets. We are teaching our children. And this is something that, as God forbid, as many of the atrocities that have taken place in Palestine, at least one thing has come out of it. People cannot plead ignorant. Myself and Matt, we actually met in Palestine. And one of the saddest things was, as we're going through the streets, there aren't Palestinian flags around. They're not allowed. So when I see the streets of London and East London with flags and Palestinian people, supporters, that's one thing, one bit of hope that you can take away, and it's very, very heartwarming. So I just want to reiterate a massive thanks to Afsana. Let's keep pushing our politicians. But for now, I'd like to welcome our panelists. Our first panelist member is Amira Nimerawi, who is a Palestinian social impact specialist who has worked for the Palestinian Medical Relief Society for the last 5.5 years. She has a background in public health, and while her expertise is called upon by loads of other agencies in the Middle East and North Africa, she's also a major speaker on health concerns. Her specialities lie in emergency response, primary health care, and women's health in conflict-affected areas. So please welcome Amira. The second person I'd like to welcome on stage as part of your panel is Dr. Omar Abdel-Mannan, who is a British-Egyptian paediatric neurologist in London, who has travelled annually since 2011 to West Bank and Gaza, teaching and training doctors as part of Medical Aid for Palestinians, MAP, who I'm sure some of you have heard of. He's led them in setting ongoing educational links between Oxford University Medical School and the Palestinian medical schools. And most recently, he has co-founded Gaza Medic Voices to amplify the voices of Gazan health workers and given them a platform to testify what they are seeing inside Gaza. And following on from this, he's co-founded many grassroots movements. I'm not going to mention them because I'm hoping that he will share some of those movements. And he's made a lot of appearances talking about Palestine. So please welcome Dr. Omar Abdel-Mannan. Next, I'd like to welcome Emili, who is a professional researcher and a member of Namud, an organisation of British Jews seeking to end their community support for occupation and apartheid in the struggle for freedom and justice for all living in Israel and Palestine. I have two more esteemed guests to welcome on the stage. Fourthly, Abdurrahman Tamimi is a British Palestinian activist who's based in London and is the president of MAB, which I believe is the Muslim Association of Britain, and he's spoken at many events. I'm sure you recognise his face. Lastly, I'd like to welcome the founder of Migration Film, Matt, who has worked in the media industry for over 20 years. In a concerted effort to bring an added element of social responsibility to his work, in recent years he has also moved into production for the charity sector, where he has applied his skills to make a tangible difference to people's lives, making videos for various projects. You may also have seen his videos, which he has captured from all the demonstrations that have taken place in London, and most of his work has been used across the news for the news. So let's welcome Matt. So I'm going to sit on the edge, and I believe there's a few microphones down as well. I've given a brief introduction to yourselves, but I'd quite like you to maybe share a little bit more, because I haven't done justice to the work that you've done and the depth of work that you've done. And I'd like to actually start on, if you could just give me your commentary on what happened today and unfolded at the ICCJ and your thoughts. So let's start with Amira, please.
Salam Alaykum, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. And as one of the speakers mentioned, it's really important that we continue to come to learn together as a community. So it's really wonderful that I've been invited to be a part of that. I'm not sure there's much more that I can add, but I am Palestinian. My family's from the West Bank in Khalil, Hebron, and my husband is actually from Gaza. So obviously everything that's happening is very personal and very close to home on so many different levels. And I work for the Palestinian Medical Relief Society, which was founded by Dr. Mustafa Barghouti, who some of you might know since his infamous Talk TV interview, which maybe we get to media later. But it's the largest Palestinian-run medical organization on the ground in Palestine. And I'm really proud to be working with them and to be able to speak about some of their work, hopefully. With respect to today, I mean, that's such a big question, isn't it? But, I mean, look, I was discussing earlier with various people, I think, unfortunately, as a Palestinian, when these sorts of things happen, we tend to expect the absolute worst case scenario. And I think that's just really sad, isn't it? That an institution and a system that should be there to protect people, we're so used to being let down that in order to protect ourselves mentally, that we prepare for the absolute worst, and that was that, you know, they would dismiss it and be in favor of Israel. So the fact that they weren't, you know, was a little bit of extra padding that, you know, I guess cushioned the blow. And you know, we can look at it from the positive perspective that it is indeed historical, and I think that hopefully it allows the conversation to move forwards in the right direction. I think also importantly, it definitely highlights the hypocrisy in these systems, and I think we all knew that, we suspect it, we feel it potentially on a gut level, but it's really obvious that these institutions and these systems are really there to protect one group. And when it comes to people from ethnic minorities, people of color, Palestinians, etc., they're not there for us. So I think it's really clear, and we'll probably talk about actions later, but we cannot rely on these systems to do this work. We have to do that work. So I think there's negatives. Obviously, there's frustration. They were so close to saying ceasefire, but didn't actually say it. And I think you know, the unfortunate thing is that potentially, as this continues on, it does make South Africa's case a bit harder. But I'll stop there and let the others speak. Thank you.
Salam Alaykum, everyone. So I'm Omar Abdel-Mannan. As per the kind of introduction, I'm a Egyptian-British pediatric neurologist, which means I look after children with brain and spinal cord disease in London. And I've been fortunate enough, one of the few people that has been able to go into and out of Gaza since 2011 with an Oxford-based team led by Professor Nick Maynard. Many of you will have seen him on TV, or have seen Dr. Deborah Harrington as well, the obstetrician who just came out of Gaza. So that team was actually inside our Aqsa hospital, and I can touch upon that maybe later, about their experience of what is actually happening on the ground. So as you said, we, in response to the 7th of October and what happened after, I was receiving messages on my phone on a daily basis from health workers, colleagues, friends saying, you know, we're being attacked in our own hospitals and we're being bombed. and I was switching on, the BBC, Israel at war. Look at The Guardian, Israel at war. There was nothing about Gaza for like 10 days. It was dystopian. For someone like me who actually knows what's happening inside, it was Black Mirror stuff. So in response to that, we started Gaza Medic Voices, and that was, working behind the camera basically to amplify the voices of the doctors. No, plan to sort of speak up or go on TV or anything like that. And then for me, the trigger point was the Al Ahli hospital bombing. When that happened, I thought, this is the straw that broke the camel's back. I have to speak up. If I don't speak up, who else is going to? And who else has been into Gaza and knows these people and can rehumanize them because they've been dehumanized for so long? So that was the response, and that's how Health Workers Palestine, which Amira, Emili, Matthew, myself are all involved in. It's a grassroots movement at the moment, and we are global. So we have 5 continents, 70 cities, holding weekly vigils, but actually doing a lot more than that, lobbying, advocacy, working on the fringes. Some of you, maybe I shouldn't say, well, I'll say this. There's a projection actually being put up essentially through our organization and through our team onto St. Thomas's Hospital as we speak, literally right now, and its message is very clear. It's a picture of a child from Gaza, and you'll see it hopefully on Instagram when you check our account, Health Workers Palestine, later. It says, this child survived. He's lost 2 legs. 11,000 children didn't. Don't look away. Don't give up on the children of Gaza. Save Gaza's children. Ceasefire now. Very simple. And that's really important. As Amira said, we have to keep speaking up and we have to keep going. In terms of my judgment on today, so I'll be candid. I'm not a pessimist, but I do see the worst case scenario, and I work back from the worst case scenario. So if you ask me as Omar, what do I think is going to happen, and I'm not saying this to be defeatist in any way, but I don't see any other way out right now apart from, the continual attacks by Israel unless someone does something. And unfortunately, this is not changing the political needle. We have to be realistic. What is important is symbolic. It's a symbolic gesture. It is South Africa taking the lead instead of the impotent Arab world, taking the lead and standing up for what is right, because they have led in terms of justice and solidarity and liberation for decades. The Bengali population, very similar. Bangladesh and South Africa, for me, are the 2 countries that, have the moral right to speak up for Palestinians, actually. No other country has that ability or right, Egypt included. No, I'm just being frank. So it's a symbolic gesture. It's a step in the right direction. They still didn't say ceasefire. It's crazy. This word is so dirty. Like, why is it so dirty to say ceasefire? Since when? And how can it be so misjudged? It's dystopian. The fact that we are calling for the end of violence is seen as something wrong. Like, what kind of world are we living in? And that is my message continuously. So I have hope that this will be a start. But I think, let's not stop there. Let's let South Africa go after the UK and the US. Rishi Sunak, President Biden, Keir Starmer, these guys all have blood on their hands. No question, they are complicit in this. As is the mainstream media, which I'll come back to at some point. Anyway, that's enough from me.
Oh, hello. Shalom Alaykum, everyone, and Shabbat Shalom, if there's anyone Jewish in the audience. I'm Emily, and I am from an organization called Na'amod. Just some background on Na'amod. So we were founded in 2018 as a response to the violence that was inflicted upon Palestinians in Gaza during the Great March of Return. That was the big kind of inciting moment for the creation of Na'amod. And we've been active ever since, but obviously our activity has really significantly stepped up since the 7th of October. So we are a grassroots, non-hierarchical Jewish organization, and we are a, forgive the pun, broad church. So you have people who are very, very much on the left. You also have people who, this is kind of their first time they've ever thought, maybe this is apartheid, maybe this is occupation. And it kind of provides a space for members of the Jewish community in Britain to stand up and make their voices heard. And I think our voices at this moment are extremely powerful. And a little bit of context on me. So this might come up in some of my answers, but not only am I a British Jew on my father's side, we won't mention about it not being halakhical according to some people, but I am also Bosnian on my mother's side. My mother's family is all from Srebrenica. If you don't know about Srebrenica, the only legally ruled incident of genocide during the Yugoslav wars happened there. It was not great. And that kind of, yeah, a bit of an understatement. And that sort of brings me on to my thoughts about the ICJ case. So what I think is really notable about the ruling today by the ICJ is that it is almost the exact same ruling that they delivered in their provisional measures in Bosnia versus Serbia in April 1993. Now, the optimist in me wants to say that, you know, because we've set a legalistic precedent here before in Bosnia, they're going to be much more likely to, well, countries that have brought this case are going to be much more likely to keep their eyes on Gaza. The pessimist in me says that was 1993. In 1995, they rounded up almost 9,000 Bosnian Muslim men and boys in Srebrenica under the eyes of the UN, whilst the Dutch were complicit in it. So swings and roundabouts. But what I think is important in this moment, and it was a very, very tense moment in my household, and I think in the households of many members of Na'amad when we were watching the verdict come out. I know I cried when I heard about it. Is that, you know, like others have said before, this is a galvanizing moment. And I think the momentum in the Palestine solidarity space right now is really astounding. It has been 112, 113 days now, and I don't see any signs of this movement slowing. In fact, I just see it getting bigger and bigger. And it isn't just Na'amad in the Jewish pro-Palestine space. You know, there's Jewish Voice for Labour, Jewish Socialists Group, Black Jewish Alliance, who are doing amazing things right now. Many other groups, like the Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions, that come to our protests. And what I think is really important is, you know, we don't get reported on a lot. People don't talk about Jews in the Palestine solidarity space, but there were 3,000 of us on the march, at the last march. If you put that into context, if you put that into a percentage context, there's only 280,000 Jewish people in the entirety of the UK. We're a very, very small community. That would be like if the march total was about 7,000 people. That's the scale of the turnout. We are hugely overrepresented in the Palestinian solidarity space. So this is my space and my time to say that, you know, I completely refute the idea that any solidarity with Palestinians is inherently anti-Semitic. That is not true. In fact, I'm very much of the opinion, and I know several members of Na'amad are of the opinion, well, all of us actually, sorry, going to be completely truthful here. All of us in Na'amad are of the opinion that you absolutely cannot ensure Jewish safety without ensuring the freedom and liberation of Palestinians. It's so important for minoritized and marginalized communities to work with each other, especially at this moment. You know, much like the Sephardi Jewish poet Emil Lazarus said, we are none of us free until we are all free, and the Palestinians especially. Thanks.
Bismillah. So yeah, my name is Abdurrahman. Assalamu Alaikum, yeah. Did I say Salam Alaykum the first time? Right, just making sure. It's quite a flattering picture. Yeah. I look too angry. First of all, just to introduce myself very quickly, I'm a fellow Hebronite, just like Amira from Al-Khalil. We have a small minority of the family who have migrated into Gaza for work before the siege and before Gaza was separated. I'm the president of the Muslim Association of Britain Youth, so the youth division. To give you some context, MAB, or the Muslim Association of Britain, is one of the several organizations that form the coalition that organizes the national marches. So it's a coalition of MAB, PSC, Palestine Solidarity Campaign, Friends of Al-Aqsa, the Stop the War Coalition, campaign for nuclear disarmament, Palestinian Forum in Britain, and there are other organizations that might not be there in the name, but for example, like Na'amad, like JVL, other bodies that are always there with us, and it's important to recognize those bodies because they've been putting in so much effort to counter all the pressures from the authorities to stop us from protesting every single time. So it's always important, and it's always good to appreciate efforts from organizations like NAMOD who always show up no matter what. Just on the issue of the ICJ, I do share a bit of the pessimism that Dr. Omar mentioned. I think as symbolic as it is, and it's very good, this is a very good thing. In the short term, it's something we need, and we need it, and maybe we didn't even know that we needed. The fact that a nation was able to stand up for the Palestinian people and go to the ICJ in the first place, and then having this whole debate, the embarrassing lawyer for Israel that was there, accusing someone, a ghost, of stealing his papers. I feel sorry for him. They should give him a refund. But seeing that, that's a very symbolic thing. It's something we should appreciate. But I don't think we should be too happy. I think there's so much more work to be done. The fact of the matter is we're not dealing with just a conflict. This is decolonization. This is bigger than just a day, bigger than just 100 days. This is an issue that has been going on for more than 100 years. And it didn't start with Israel. It didn't start with the Arab neighbors. It started with Britain. It started with Britain giving my grandmother's land, my grandmother's home, our grandfather's land away. It started with colonialism, and it must end with decolonization. I'm sure that the panel's going to go on, and there's more to talk about. So I'll leave it there, inshallah.
Salam Alaykum. Firstly, I'd like to give a big thank you to Salam Jones and the whole Hope and Mike crew for putting on tonight. These guys have worked so hard. I mean, listen, I just pulled this panel together. That's all I did. These guys, everything else you see, they've worked tirelessly. So alhamdulillah, thank you so much for making this available tonight for all of us to see, and for Islam Channel for coming to live stream, alhamdulillah. Well, as a white Englishman, firstly, I'm not in a position to apologise for what Britain did, and it's not on me to do that, but I'm sorry for what Britain did. Absolutely, it's something that that we need to hear from the mouths of the government, from the royalty, from the House of Commons. You know, starting with an apologies, finishing with reparations. You know, the Commonwealth. It's basically what's it called, a fencing shop, isn't it? When you still started working in the humanitarian sector, and I studied humanitarian response to conflict and disaster online at Harvard University. So one of the four humanitarian principles: humanity, independence, neutrality, and impartiality. And when we were coming out of Tel Aviv airport, they said, "So, would you like to jump in front of this group?" And I said, "I'm with this group." They said, "Oh, could you come with us, please?" So they took me to this booth, and they started asking me all these questions. Why are you here? And I said, "Because I'm running around a marathon." Why? I said, "It's the Palestine half marathon." "Would you run for Israel?" "Yes." All these many questions. Then the final question was, "What do you think of Gaza?" And I was like, "Oh, okay." And I was like, well, what I should have said was he was an amazing footballer, but alcohol ruined his life. But I wasn't quick enough. I just said, I'm a humanitarian, I don't take sides. And I've had to try to stick to that, and it's been very difficult until I saw the police and soldiers go into Al-Aqsa Mosque in 2021, firing off tear gas, beating worshippers who were worshipping in the spot where I had prayed, alhamdulillah. And that was it. I was like, you know, there's being neutral and impartial, and then there's been silence in the face of oppression. And so, yeah, I started to speak out, started to film the protests. I noticed that it wasn't being covered in mainstream media. The only people who were covering it actually were Islam Channel and myself. And I think Al Jazeera started to cover it, and some of the other channels, Al Hawar. But basically, I started off doing that, filming these protests, and that's how I've come to know everybody on this panel, through the activism. And going to today, the ICJ, you know, I mean, I noticed that Mr. Beady Eyes, I call them Mr. Wig and Mr. Beady Eyes, and Mr. Beady Eyes wasn't there today. He had someone else in the seat, but Mr. Wigg didn't say anything, thankfully. But I was thinking to myself, if something doesn't happen, if there's not even a gesture of a ruling, if they dismiss it out of hand, that's it. Firstly, I ain't paying tax again. Secondly, law means nothing to anybody. So they had to do something. I believe they had to do something with this. I also agree they should have called for a ceasefire. We're waiting for them to call for a ceasefire. They didn't. It's not far enough. But, you know, as everyone has said as well tonight, that it's a step. And it's not just about the last 112 days, as Abdurrahman said. It goes back to 1600s. When proper colonialism started. I know it started with the Romans, maybe a bit before that, but you know, these issues have started from like 500 years ago, and you know, this is a big watershed moment. But I can't believe that they have to wait a month. You know, there should be something immediate. But anyway, yeah, that's what I think.
Can I just add one thing on the? I think you could think of it as you know, it's like a carrot and stick. So, in some ways, you can argue that had they called for a ceasefire, there may have been a group of activists or a group of people within this, you know, the pro-Palestine movement that would have been like, "Oh, great, let's go home now." And actually, this is galvanizing us. This is a step. So the simplest example is Tahrir Square, 2011, Egypt. Mubarak gets toppled. Right, let's all go home, all good. Where are we now? Because people didn't realize where is the actual cancer. The cancer is much deeper. It needs to be removed. And that actually, as you said, is all about decolonization. This is a settler colonialist state that has been ruling over native people that they have displaced in the hundreds of thousands and now millions. And they are continuing. So if anything, you could look on the glass half full side and say, this is just galvanizing and let's push further. And you could also argue that had they not ruled for it, all hell could have broken loose. I mean, God knows, like people, you know, speaking to people, and this is colleagues who have been to Africa, traveling around the world, they're saying when you go to Kenya, Ethiopia, you go to these countries, people are livid. Like the people have forgotten their own problems when they're in their country, and they're just disgusted by what is happening. So the global south is mobilizing. There's been a grand awakening, I call it. This is the grand awakening. This is the paradigm shift in terms of world history when there will be a change. And maybe this is a chance to start basically getting rid of the global elite. This might be a push towards, you know, a better future. I know this is pie in the sky stuff, but there is no reason why not to hope for that and not to think about that.
No, thank you very much for your insights. And I think it was really important for us to start with the ICJ and hearing the different perspectives, and your perspective, your historical perspective, really helps us shape our narratives as well. And it helps us to think, okay, there isn't just one way of doing things or one way of thinking about things. And I think what you've just mentioned is really important. This is bigger than all of us. This isn't just about a ceasefire, even though that's really important right now. This is about a liberation of a people that have been occupied. And, you know, you'd call ceasefire a dirty word. Apartheid is apparently a dirty word too. Anyhow, I don't want to be, I shouldn't be here talking too much. There's so many things that we can talk upon, and I will give you all the mic at some point to ask your questions. I think it's really important for us as people who are sitting here, born maybe in London, sitting here in East London. There's people on this panel who have family members in Palestine, in Gaza, whether it be in Khalil. I think it's really important for us to hear from you and what the situation is like for you. We've just seen, I think it was yesterday, when the one Gazan voice that disrupted Angela Rayner, he was the one that was violently pushed out, and that's appalling. And we need to give the voices. I've always said, and I've done hosting for Palestinian events, we are not the voice of Palestinian people, we are the microphones. And it's important for the voice to actually speak out loud. So I would love to hear from you, Amira, and I'd love to hear from you, Abdurrahman, and also Dr. Omar, even though you're Egyptian, you've got experience on the ground, something that we've seen things on the screen, you've seen them live. I'd love to, if it's okay, to just take a few minutes to hear from you and your personal perspectives.
Thank you for that. I don't really know where to start, to be honest, but, you know, I think that I think from day one, especially with respect to what happened in October with Gaza, my heart sank, and we knew what was coming. And I think that despite the fact that my whole life has been every single day in some way aware of what's happening in Palestine, and of course, I work for a Palestinian medical organization, so it's my work, it's my personal life. Every aspect of my life, especially right now, is colored with what's happening. So, I mean, it's hard because I think in the early stages, we couldn't eat, we couldn't sleep. Every morning, woke up with a pit in my stomach, checking my phone, really scared of what I was going to see. I think that the evacuation notices for the first hospital, I thought, my God, we've never seen anything in Gaza like this. And we've seen stuff, and I've lived through stuff myself in the West Bank, but this was just on another level. And now fast forward, 112 days, and every single hospital in Gaza has been affected. I mean, most of them are completely shut down. A few of them are partially functioning, and it's obviously a disaster. Every single university has been completely obliterated. Cultural sites, housing, and we can go on, and I think most of us here know that. So, and I was sort of speaking to someone before, not to say that it's become normal, but even just in my physical being, let's say, that waking up every morning, oh my God, what's happened, and is Mortaz still alive? Is Plastia still alive? Dr. Ghassan, I was so worried about, we kind of have attached to certain people that have given us that. And we've lost family. My husband has lost 70 members of his family, and in some ways probably even more. But my nephew, who's just come back from Turkey, he's studying here 2 days ago. He grew up in Gaza, and it was just so normal for him that he's lost friends and teachers, and it's just, he's like, well, yeah, we expect, and we've lost these people. So I don't want to say it's become normal, but somehow we've had to adjust because it's too much in a physical being to carry this weight. And then just to bring attention to the West Bank, because I think that's really important, and to Abdurrahman saying that, this isn't just about the ceasefire in Gaza and the situation in Gaza, this is about the colonization across the entire country of Palestine. And we're looking at the West Bank, and we were seeing images of the men that had been abducted and stripped naked and tortured. That was actually happening in the West Bank before it happened in Gaza. And I'm so scared that I'm going to find my uncles or my cousins or my colleagues or my friends in those videos. It's horrific. 5,000 people now have been abducted and taken illegally into imprisonment in the West Bank since the 7th of October, and a third of them are children. So, it's not easy, but I think having the space to be able to speak about what's happening and on that personal level is really important. And I don't want to take up time.
Sorry, Matt just had my mic. I think what you've just said is exactly why we need to hear from yourselves, because we won't have, as much as we feel it, I won't know what it's like to lose 70 members of my family in one go, and I can't even imagine it. This is the difference.
I just want to jump in there because, this is a conversation I've been having with my husband. I don't think even we yet have had the time and the space to understand what it feels like, because it's just constant. And so I don't think any of us as a collective, whether you've lost family or not in Gaza, but of course there's people that have, been dealing with this on a personal level, like we still don't even understand it. Like we haven't had that time because it's just constant, but yeah.
Really appreciate it. Abdurrahman, can you share a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I mean, to be honest, my family don't have, they didn't face a significant loss in Gaza, but I have a cousin who lives in Gaza. He's originally from Hebron. His father migrated to Gaza for work, and eventually he was allowed back with his family and his kids back to Hebron, but his eldest son, Riyadh, married a Gazan. And as a result, he had to stay with his wife and his children in Gaza. During this war, they were displaced from Tel el-Hawa, which is in the north of Gaza. They used to live in an apartment block, and if you know, Gaza is a very overpopulated city. So most people were living in apartments. So when the bomb drops, when the missile hits, it's not just one house. It's an entire neighborhood. It is an entire town. So they had to move out and stay with their in-laws. And then his father-in-law's block was also damaged, so they had to move out. And bearing in mind, it's very difficult to communicate to people in Gaza. They have limited internet, and it cuts off so often. And they have limited electricity throughout the day as well. So I get pieces of news every now and then, once here, and then 4 days later, then 2 weeks later, etc. Yesterday, he sent me a video, and he's managed to go back to Tel el-Hawa to see what's happened to his apartment, and it's completely destroyed. But the echoing phrase, Allah al-Musta'an, what can we do? Subhanallah, alhamdulillah. There's always gratitude to Allah. There's always hope. There's always an element of gratitude and hope and looking to the future. He lost his father-in-law. If you recall, in the first ceasefire, that temporary halt, some people tried to go back. And the Israeli soldiers already entered in the north and they started shooting at people. His father-in-law was one of those people. But I think while Gaza is the subject, and Gaza is where we see these massacres, where this genocide is taking place, where we are seeing the live ethnic cleansing, it's actually important to shed a bit of light on the West Bank. If you keep thinking about Gaza as a separate entity, you'll lose sight of Palestine as a whole. Yes. The fact of the matter is, Gaza's separation hasn't completely liberated it. The fact of the matter is Gaza is still occupied. It's still occupied by Israel. Israel still controls its borders. When Mu'taz left the border, and I'm sure when you guys left Gaza, you would have seen how much aid is piled up behind the border waiting in Egypt. Because of the Israelis. The Israelis aren't letting in anything. They control the medicine. They control the milk. They control the water. They control the gas, the electricity, everything. If that's not occupation, I don't know what occupation is. And then on top of all of that, you have a collaborator gang, a filthy, rotten mafia that is centered in Ramallah, that is controlling the West Bank, that is telling Palestinians to go and sit back in their homes when their brothers and sisters are being massacred in Gaza, called the Palestinian Authority. That in itself is worse than the occupation. I can tell you for sure, my family have said this. They would rather live in Area C, which the majority of my family are in. Area C is a militarized area where you are under immediate military control of the Israeli army, as opposed to Area B or Area A. Area A is full, again, I say it in quotation marks, Palestinian control. They would rather be subjected to Israeli occupation directly than to be at the mercy of the Palestinian Authority, who imprison on behalf of the Israelis, who murder and torture on behalf of the Israelis. So it's important to know that the oppression and the occupation is two-faced. There's more than one element and more than one route in which it perpetrates, and I don't think we'll be able to see a complete end, a complete solution, without the West Bank, which the neighboring areas to Gaza rising up as well. Because Gaza at the moment is secluded. The Gazans, our brothers and sisters in Gaza are very, very strong. They are patient, but we can't think of it as a separate entity. It's all united.
Dr. Omar, could you share a bit of insight?
Yes, so I think, as you said rightly, I'm not Palestinian, and so that I have to kind of colour that with anything I say. But my experience of being in, I used to travel to the West Bank 2011 to 2014. My first ever experience in Palestine was in the West Bank in East Jerusalem, and I actually went back. I wrote a blog at the time because it was during my elective year when I was doing a lot of traveling to all over the place. And I wrote a blog and I was rereading it a few weeks ago. And the kind of thing that came out, and it was just so obvious when the first time you visit, it's just the level of control that the Israelis have in the West Bank. And the control as Abdurrahman and Amira said, is literally everything. It's, it's medical students, for example, who I was teaching, telling me to get from literally Abu Dis, the campus of the medical school, to the house in Ramallah, which is, as a crow flies, like a kilometer. They literally have to do this crazy round trip of like 10 kilometers or 20 kilometers just to get there, and that takes them hours often. And often they'll get stopped at checkpoints, they'll get stripped, they'll get beaten, they'll get abused, they'll be called animals, subhuman animals, the same language that we've seen. So this has been consistent. I saw this in 2011. We saw this, consistently, and it was a very tense environment to be in. And Hebron, where both Amira and Abdurrahman are from, is almost like it's like on steroids, the West Bank on steroids. It's horrific, like because the occupation of the settlers there is just so in your face, and it is so apparent. Even the mosque, the Ibrahimi mosque, where Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam is buried, they've taken over that mosque and created this shrine for them, which is not even a shrine, it's a tourist trap. And they've left the Muslim community with this tiny strip. And it's even as a Muslim, it's just embarrassing. We used to go and pray in Masjid al-Aqsa in Jerusalem, unoccupied Jerusalem, right? So you go and pray, and as a British Muslim, you go in, and the first thing that you get stopped, and you're asked, where are you from? UK. Are you Muslim? Yes. Read the Fatiha. Dude, what do you mean read the Fatiha? Read the Fatiha, prove it. So I read Qul ya ayyuha kafirun to them, to their face. That was my response. So and this is the reality. So this is the West Bank. When you go into Gaza, so I went into Gaza 5 times, 2015 to 2020. The trip there, we went through Ben Gurion to Erez, and when we get to Erez from the north, and ironically you can't get in via Egypt, so you couldn't have, even with, as an Egyptian. So we used to go through the Israeli side. It's extremely dehumanizing, and I'm saying this, and it's 1% of what the Palestinians feel, but even I felt like subhuman going into there, because as you go in, you are encountered by basically an airport-style terminal where they check your, baggage and stuff, and then they let you through, and everything at that point is done via microphone, via loudspeakers. There's no human interaction, and they shout at you, literally, move, put your bag down. Like just a microphone shouting at you. And you go through a 1 kilometer long tunnel that's basically fenced on both sides. And on both sides you see the tanks, you see the snipers, you see the drones, you hear the buzzing of the drones above you. And it is a full no-go zone. Anyone who goes anywhere near there is shot at point blank range. And then you arrive into Gaza, and you get into Gaza, and the first thing you see is the warm embrace of the Gazans and the Palestinian people, and they treat you like royalty. It's embarrassing. They treat you like you are Muhammad Ali, entering the ring. It's crazy. And the British doctors, the white British doctors I went with, all of them during our stay, when we leave, we are all crying. They're all in tears, because for them, they make them so welcome. And I've said this before, I feel often more at home in Gaza than I did even in Egypt or in London, just because of the warmth of the people there. And this sumud, or steadfastness, which they have, which is linked to the belief that Allah knows best, and that this is your Allah's decree, and what can we do about it? But they have this amazing steadfastness that is incredible, and you see it day to day. You see it when Mu'taz and when these journalists, when when his children are killed, and he's said that speech. I remember the speech that he gave, and I remember thinking, this is sumud, and this is tawakkul in Allah, which is belief in Allah's decree personified. The way he just held himself and just able to, not many people can do that. These are amazing human beings. These are anomalies, but the anomalies in Gaza are very frequent. That's the reality, because they are in that state of occupation. Gaza is one of the most literate places on earth. 98% of the population can read and write. In Egypt, it's like 60%. It's embarrassing. But this is, these people are just so highly educated. And the doctors are being targeted for a reason. The journalists are being targeted for a reason, because these are, the people who can testify to what is happening. They can document these injuries. They are the highest, in terms of in society in their area. They're the professionals. They're most respected people, and they are truth givers. And for the Israelis, anyone who's a truth giver or a truth provider is a target. So when 407 healthcare workers have been killed since 7th of October, and 30 hospitals have been either bombed, besieged, or made dysfunctional through a continual attack on every healthcare system. And when 110 healthcare workers are being abducted and tortured, and when people come out and they say, I saw this doctor, Dr. Ahmed, he was with me and he was tortured 10 times worse than me because they knew he was a medic. There is a reason for that. They are not stupid. The Israelis know what they are doing. They are trying to break the back of the Palestinians, but they will never break their back because the Palestinians will rise, always, always, wherever you put them.
I just wanted to quickly jump in and challenge a couple of things. So the first thing is you said you're not Palestinian, but we are all Palestinian. We are. Because it's not just about ethnicity. It's about the fact that we're banding together. And as you said, you were treated like royalty. And that's because we understand what family is, what community is. We are all Palestinian. And it's not just something that we say at the rallies. It's real. Because we're all standing for what's right and for what's just, and we're human beings, we're banding together. And the other thing that you said, actually, that I wanted to challenge is that because you don't have family there and you're not Palestinian, that maybe you're not feeling it. But I don't think that's true. I think that's why this is so powerful, because we are feeling it, because we're human beings. Again, it's not about the divisions that you're Palestinian, I'm not Palestinian. It's about the fact that our humanity is awakening. You know, a lot of people have been saying like humanity never existed because of everything that's happening and the lack of reaction from leaders. No, humanity did. It's just being awakened. It's being numbed, and we're waking up together. And, you know, so we are all Palestinian, and everyone's feelings are valid.
No, very, very well said. And I take back what I said, because you're absolutely right. And I meant it in the sense that you have a different perspective. I've been to Palestine, but my parents were not born there. My grandfather's homes weren't stolen, but you're absolutely right. When we are on those marches and when we chant in our millions and our thousands, I tell you, I feel it, because you've rightly said we are all humans. And I just want to point out one thing. The fact that the Gaza Strip, this one area that has so much resistance and occupation upon it, but is one of the most literate places in the world. That in itself shows the resilience and the sumud of these people. And I have to mention Dr. Rafat Al-Arir, because when he came to London, many of us, I saw him and I met him personally. And the fact that he was targeted and he was such a gentle being, what you've said, it strikes a chord, because this is systematic genocide. It's not just genocide, it's systematic. They know very well who they're targeting and why they're targeting them. So that's my 2 cents.
I just wanted to add, you know, this is a clear example. So Dr. Musab Nasser, who you remember, Amira, he's a Gazan who's head of a charity called Fajr that does amazing work in Gaza, and he's based in the US. He started going on TV and basically speaking up. He came to the UK, he was instigator of one of the first vigils. And, you know, only days after, 70 members of his family were killed in one bomb strike. Every single death in that building was one of his family members. And, you know, he had just done a whole round around the Middle East, met the Kuwaitis, met the Egyptians, met the Qataris, signed memorandums of understanding, sorted stuff out to basically get Fajr in. And within a day of that, they killed literally 4 generations of his family just gone. And tell me that's not targeted. I mean, that is for sure 100% targeted.
Absolutely. I do want to move the conversation on a little bit. I know we're pressed for time as well. Emili, I'd like to come to you now. I would like to hear your perspective as a Jew who lives in Britain. You've mentioned something when you were introducing yourself and talking about the percentage of Jewish people who are actually against apartheid and against what we're led to believe Jewish people stand for. And I want to hear from you, and one, about the media bias around Jews who support Palestine, and also how it feels to witness, I guess, a genocide happen in your name, to put it bluntly.
It's the only way I can describe it is it's jarring. It's incredibly jarring, and especially like at this very moment. I mean, tomorrow is Holocaust Memorial Day, and I'm not fortunate enough to be descended from Holocaust survivors. My Jewish family moved to Britain in 1750, so we escaped a lot of that. But there are many. Well, I'd say the majority of Na'amod is descended from Holocaust survivors, or at the very least, people who are descended from the victims of pogroms. So it's horrifying. It goes against absolutely every single tenet of Judaism as I know it and as all of us know it. Much like in Islam, the most sacred tenet of Judaism is the preservation of a human life. And in Judaism, you can break every single commandment except 3, so that's idol worship, rape, and murder, in order to save a human life. So let's say you're an observant Orthodox Jew, you're a consultant pediatric neurologist. If you were called in for an emergency call on Shabbat, it would be your duty as a Jewish person to go in and save a human life. That is the most fundamental tenet of the religion. You could eat pork, you could drink unconsecrated wine, you could blaspheme the name of God, so long as you preserved a human life. So it's like someone spitting in your face is the only way I can describe it. It's disappointing, it's infuriating, it's every bad word I can think of that I'm not allowed to say publicly. You feel like you can call them a Chilul Hashem, which means a desecration of the name of God. It's probably the worst thing you can call someone. In Judaism, you can call them a Chilul Hashem all you want, but you feel a little bit powerless. But, the important thing is that, to some degree, we aren't. So yeah, touching on your point about kind of the media narrative around Jews in the UK. Obviously, I'm a white lady, I went to a very good university, I sound like Princess Diana, so I do kind of tick all these boxes. But there is very much like a view in the UK of Jewish people as primarily being descendants of Ashkenazi Jews. So Ashkenazi Jews are Jewish people who, when they were exiled 2,000 years ago, ended up in Northern and Eastern Europe. There's an image of Jews being Ashkenazi, white Ashkenazi, because there's lots and lots of mixed race Ashkenazi people. Oxbridge educated, middle class, and socially conservative. And that is not true. That does a complete disservice to our community. For instance, the broadcaster Rachel Shabi, if you've seen her speaking on Sky News, her family are from Baghdad. She is an Iraqi Jew. She describes herself as an Arab Jew. Our communities are very, very closely interlinked, and I think one of the great tragedies about the state of Israel is the damage that it, obviously, aside from all of the horrors being inflicted upon the Palestinians, is the damage that it did to Jewish communities in the Middle East that had been there, actually for longer than the exile. There had been Jewish communities in Egypt for 3,500 years. If you go to Elephantine, there are records of our existence as Jewish people, unfortunately as mercenaries, we won't go into that. In Elephantine, the Elephantine papyruses contain records of a Jewish soldier writing back to his father, and the dad says, your mother's been very disappointed that you haven't written back, she's so worried. So, nothing changes, guys. But yeah, I think it's incredibly frustrating. This is the dominant narrative. If you hear from Jewish women, they're zippy hotter belly. They are even more violent. They are even more willing to incite, excuse genocide in public. And they get a free pass. And I think as well, one of the other things that I really want to challenge, and I really want everyone in this room to challenge as well when they hear it, is I think you often hear this idea that is spouted by everyone from Joe Biden to Joe Blogs on the street, that Jewish people are only safe in Israel. You hear it all the time. Oh, without Israel, you guys wouldn't be safe. The question I have to ask, and the question I want you guys to ask is, why don't I deserve to be safe in Britain? What does that say? Why don't I deserve to be safe? If I'm not safe anywhere but Israel, why am I not safe here? Why don't I deserve safety in the country that my ancestors have lived in for 250 years? What precedent does that set, that I'm only safe in an ethno-nationalist state that my ancestors haven't lived in for 2,000 years or longer? What does that say? Because I think that's actually a very sinister thing to say about Jewish people. It's kind of this idea that you can pick us all up and just push us onto the Palestinians, go, you're their problem now, which I think is very, very deeply disturbing. But yeah, it's intensely frustrating. But I think the thing that sticks with me, and I'm not a hugely religious person, I'm here on Shabbat, is there is a saying in a Jewish text called Pirkei Avot, which means the words of our fathers. I'm not sure if it's similar in Arabic, I assume it's not. And it says that you are not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to desist from it. And I think that is something that we can all take from today. None of us are obligated to sit here. None of us are obligated to campaign for a free Palestine. No one is telling us that we have to, as in no one's got a gun to our head and is saying you have to. But none of us are free to stop here either. None of us are free to sit down and go, I've done enough. I've done my work for today. So yeah, I think it's important to keep on promoting, uplifting Jewish voices that are in solidarity with Palestinians. Keep on talking about the really important solidarity work that's going on. You know, there are members of Na'amod right now who are in the South Hebron Hills who are guarding the flocks of Palestinian shepherds because we know that the army won't shoot us because we're Jewish. It's about putting our bodies on the line. It's about standing in front of people. It's about using our voice as Jewish people, you know, like on Holocaust Memorial tomorrow, you know, we have a Palestinian speaker coming to talk about genocide, coming to talk about the Nakba. It's important to keep doing that. It's important to keep uplifting that and to not fall into this idea that Jews in the UK are white, conservative, male, and they went to Oxbridge.
Can I just say, Emily, and I'm not saying this because she's next to me, but you know, if anyone wants courage personified and bravery personified, this is your women here, because you know, I have been speaking up, Amira has been speaking up, many of us and Abdurrahman, we've been, you know, I've done media appearances and 90% of the messages I get are very supportive. I get a tiny bit of, you know, Hamas support to terrorists, go back to your country, all that stuff, right? But I am sure, and I know that Emily has been subjected to levels of abuse from within her own community and within the wider community that are just absolutely despicable. And for her to keep going and say, oh, I don't care, like, it's not going to affect me, that is actually courage and that is actually bravery. So thank you for doing that.
I'd like to add something. I think Emily's mentioned very, very important things, and I think it's not wild to assume that a majority of people in the room are Muslim. And as a Muslim, I think there's a responsibility for the Muslim community to recognize how important it is to unite, to be as unified as possible. And we shouldn't let ignorance affect or make us you know, have misjudgments. For example, you mentioned Rachel Shabi being a Iraqi Jew. I'll refer you to someone, Avi Shleim. Avi Shleim is a Israeli professor of he's an Iraqi Jew. He moved to Israel at the age of 9. His parents moved to Israel. They migrated to Israel in the early 50s. As a result of the bombings that were carried out in Iraq to scare the Jewish population. Now, Israel claims that it was the Arabs that did this because they were anti-Semitic. But there is evidence to prove, and it's mentioned in his book, there's a book that he's written, it's a memoir called 3 Worlds, Memoirs of an Arab Jew, where he says that the Mossad were responsible in sending gangs to Iraq to bomb synagogues in the name of Arabs, and they would hand out leaflets to scare people away, which escalated and catalyzed the migration, the forced migration of Arab Jews into Israel. So the idea that you had to be safe in Israel and only Israel is a complete farce. Now, on that note, and to add to that, a lot of people, and we have to admit this, we have to admit a big issue. Unfortunately, there is a huge level of ignorance where people think that there is somewhat an inherent war between Muslims and Jews. And this is factually incorrect. It is factually incorrect. No matter how many people can come, there are scholars that may have come up and said things like this, but it's factually incorrect, and it is a taint on the lessons and the words of the Prophet ﷺ, in which we were taught to respect our neighbors, in which he was the role model who treated his Jewish neighbors with the utmost respect. And we have a responsibility to those Ahl al-Dhimma, Ahl al-Kitab, the people of the book. And we all believe together in one God. So it's very important to have history. And this is going to move on to something else.
We don't have a huge amount of time because we do need to move on to Q&A.
No worries, no worries.
But maybe we can hold your thought, because I would love for you to all to summarize and end it. Before we move on to Q&A, I do want to ask Matt, we've heard a lot. There's one question that, I mean, all of us are here to take action, continue. I want to ask you, what can we do as a filmmaker? You know, you've gone and captured a lot of footage and you've been at these marches. But from you as an individual, what can we do? What's your response?
I think that, well, firstly, I also want to say how brave you are, Emily, standing up. I've heard of the threats that you've had. I heard you speak with Dr. Omar before. And another round of applause, honestly, it takes real bravery. What can we do? Well, listen, we've just seen today the ICJ. And how did that come about? That came about by people filming, people sharing, people posting, people resharing. And this is vital. Who would have thought that a video shared online could actually bring a court ruling? Okay, it's slightly toothless court ruling, but it's something. But the point is that, what can we do? We can, there are many protests, many forms of protesting, Wearing the kufiya is a form of protest. Wearing this hat with Palestine is a form of protest. Going into the work, sitting on the tube, with a Palestine, sticking a Palestine. And actually, no, maybe I shouldn't say this. You shouldn't vandalise anything or stick stickers anywhere. If you're going to do it, stick it on your own property. But yeah, stickering. But the most important thing is to keep the narrative going and go to protests, attend protests. There's something that whatever information you can find, share it. But before you hit share, just have a little think and look at it twice and think, is this the right information? It's very important to get the right information out there shared. There's many different voices of action. There's obviously health workers for Palestine. Honoured to be involved with doing stuff with them. There's obviously PSC, Stop the War, all of the protest partners that Brother Abdurrahman talked about. There's also Palestine Action. I don't know if you've heard of them. They shut down Elbit. Do your research. Do what you can. Spread the narrative. An example is Caterpillar. I'm doing a little short film on this. I'm releasing Wednesday, but I didn't realise they remanufactured, designed the gearboxes and drive transmissions for the Caterpillar D9 and D9R bulldozer, and these are the ones that are going into Gaza, killing people in tents, in the West Bank, tearing up the streets of Jenin. These are manufactured, designed and remanufactured and fixed in Shrewsbury, in this country. And that's just that small component. So if we do our research, if we work together, if we communicate information, a lot can be done. I'm just going to pass it on to
Boycott.
Definitely. I think boycott has proven, if anything, this time round, people are understanding, learning, and realising I can stop having certain things. Now, we are running out of time, and I think the voices here are just as important. So I know you've all got many questions. So can I get some hands up so we can figure out how we do it? Okay, for now, we'll go to each individual. But if there's a lot, then I'll take the questions and I'll ask the panel. Do we have a mic?
Yes.
So we've got a gentleman in the middle with the hat. Oh, he's saying... Maybe if you could stand up and give us your question and who you'd like to direct the question to, please.
I think you all can hear me. I can hear voice. Thank you, panel. My name is Muhammad Rafiqullah. I'm Bangladeshi. I'm a member of Labour Party. Although I feel a bit shame and shy myself saying that, because my leader, who have voted against ceasefire, as well as my own MP. So what I say against them, I only say they are killers. Those whoever throughout the world vote against ceasefire, they are killers. They believe in killing. So the message I like to pass today, you all from different boroughs, and it's not my leader of the Labour Party, it's not my MP only. Maybe your area, your MP haven't also voted against ceasefire. So what we do, we should not vote them again. This is the first message. And campaign against it. If you vote for them, and if they get re-elected, it means you are a killer too.
Thank you. You've answered the question of what can we do perfectly.
I'd like this panel, thank you panel, to tell us today, people like me, who understand very little, when I go out on the street, what do I tell people about Palestine? Should I say we believe in two-state solution? Should I say we want all Jews out of Palestine? Should I say what was allocated in 1948 when forcefully two ships took group of Jewish into Israel, and the land was given to them? Should they go back into their land? So give us a clear instruction.
Let's hear from the panel.
Here,
Brother,
we don't want to.
Yeah.
We don't want to confuse people outside. One say we want two-state
That's fine.
Palestine. One say we want a Jewish out.
I'm going to stop you there.
Thank you.
I'm going to stop you there. Thank you very much for your questions and for your message. Dr. Omar, I can see that you want to answer that question.
No, sure. First of all, just about the voting, I think that's really important. That's a very important point, because there are, and this is, I said this in the last March, every single person should be writing to their MPs, asking to meet their MPs and saying, what is your stance on Gaza? What is your stance on ceasefire? What is your stance on genocide? And look them in the white of their eyes and wait for that response. And if there are marginal seats in certain areas, we can mobilize the vote to start using that pro-Palestine vote to push people into changing their stance. So that's one point. In terms of educating the public, this is my personal opinion, and maybe Amira and Abdurrahman will have other thoughts, but I don't think it's my role to tell the average Joe whether there should be a two-state solution or a one-state solution or a no-state solution. I don't think that's my role. My role as a citizen, concerned citizen, is I'm watching a genocide happening live on TV. That is a basic decimation of our humanity. So as a basic need for a human being who wants peace, just on that basic level, people should be able to understand. You can tell them about the statistics. You can, I'm privileged. I've been in there. I'm talking to people. I can actually say this child died, this friend died. Amira has lost members of her family. So I think that's one element. I think just starting on that level. I think it's for Palestinians to decide in Palestine what comes next. And Abdurrahman, but not only that, I think it's also for the diaspora, the Palestinian diaspora, and those, and even Western people like us who understand the cause and are trying to help. We can collectively, we need to be unified. There is a huge problem in the Muslim world and the Muslim Ummah in that we are disunited on a massive scale. We look at UAE and Saudi Arabia normalizing with Israel. We look at Egypt closing the borders and monetizing from a genocide. This is, these countries are rotting at the core. And it is the role of, Western thought leaders, Western Muslims, Arabs, pro-human, Palestinians, Jews, Palestinians, to basically help to push that agenda forward. I think Amira wanted to say something.
I'm just conscious of time, but it comes down to two words: human rights. That's it. We're not even at the stage one state, two state. This isn't a political discussion. Anytime someone tries to bring it to that, let's just focus on the human rights, because Palestinians do not have access to equal rights. So that's the first step before we discuss anything else. And usually when you bring it to people's attention that we're talking about human rights first and equality, everything else fades, and it's very simple.
Thank you very much. We have other questions. Can I just ask if we can just limit it to the question, so that we're maximizing on time. We have a question there, and I'm cautious that I might not be able to see everybody, and we have a question here. So if we can go to the gentleman at the back, and then we'll come to the lady at the front, and there's a gentleman at the back. So there's three questions. Okay, I've got you. Please. Thank you very much. that question for us too.
Yeah, I mean, I can't talk about any principles of Islamic faith because unfortunately I'm not a theologian, but I can talk about kind of colonialism and division. So I think one of the things that this kind of most recent escalation in the genocide can show us in terms of kind of working to unite communities together, I think in the UK especially, is so many more people are being educated about the very real nature, the very real interconnected nature of Islamophobia and anti-Semitism in Britain. And I think this is sometimes things people can forget, especially as we do live in a culturally Christian country. And you know, whether we are Jews or Muslims, we are definitely and absolutely othered by the British government. I mean, you know, if you look at the Aliens Act that was passed, I think, in the 1920s, that barred Jewish refugees fleeing from Europe and fleeing from Nazism and persecution, I mean, I fail to see how that's any different to refusing to accept Palestinian refugees. I think one of the things this can show us is the fact that our struggles are so interconnected, that our suffering is interconnected. And I think on a more casual note and a more friendly note, you know, because there is so much intergroup solidarity, you know, I have many Palestinian friends, is seeing how similar we are as groups, how similar our religious traditions are, how similar, you know, our languages are, even kind of talking about things like Judeo-Arabic, which was a language that was very widely spoken especially in Iraq, but also kind of in the North African Sephardi community, which is where my family were originally from. I think it can give us hope to show us that, at risk of sounding a bit trite, that actually there are a lot of things that are so similar about us, and the ways in which we've been marginalized and mistreated are actually very, very similar, and that we can work together to provide a better solution. Like South Africa has given us kind of a vision of a new world that's kind of struggling to be born, and I think that's one in which, you know, Jews and Muslims and Christians and Manichaeans and Yazidis and Zoroastrians, et cetera, can stand in community with each other.
Amazing. I'm not going to go to the panel. I think there's a sister here. I'm not going to go back to your first question because I think Abdurrahman very beautifully and eloquently spoke about that when he spoke about his family members. And there's a sister here who had a question. Salam Alaykum and Shalom Alaykum.
Some actions that you have forced yourself to do to also maybe put your phone down and also remember that you have to breathe to be able to fight. I think with a lot of people, we have this thing where if you're ill, then you can't actually go on the street, and there's so many other things you can do. And also to take that 10 minutes to yourself, you have to go out and fight more. So I just wonder what some of the actions might be that you take. Thank you.
That's a really, really good question. Who'd like to take it?
So I think that's really important, and we've had this conversation before about self-care, because I actually have this thought that self-care is part of the decolonization process, because I think, you know, we're so used to our bodies being used for commercial gain, for capitalism, that we're sort of in that mode where we just have to like go, and we've forgotten that actually it's really important to put back in. And if you look at indigenous cultures, you know, we're very traditionally good at, you know, sort of balancing the work with the play, with the, you know, the way that we eat and sleep and taking care of ourselves. So I think it's a really important part of the decolonization process. So that, thinking of it like that has actually given me permission to kind of take some time out to be able to refuel, as you've said, to then be able to move forwards. And I think also, you know, the points that were raised by pretty much everyone here, this is the long road to freedom, right? This isn't just going to happen with the ceasefire. It's about ending the occupation. It's about decolonization. So we have to be sustainable, and we have to, you know, it's that classic example of the oxygen mask for you first before you put it onto someone else. And then just being strict with whatever time you have, like actually just reminding yourself, because I think there's an element of habit there. We know that about social media. I think a lot of us felt like we had to bear witness because we couldn't do more than that. And I think that there's different ways to bear witness, and it's educating, it's speaking to people from different groups, different minorities, different communities. We don't have to be watching it all the time to actually be, you know, active and doing our bit. So, yeah.
You're going to talk about self-care? Well, I'm not going to talk about self-care. Just what to say before we wind up, because we have to finish now because there's a break coming. I'll go to, on the Linktree, Health Workers for Palestine, yeah, and also Linktree, How to Help Gaza. And on How to Help Gaza, there's different sections. There's protest partners, there's educational resources, reliable news sources, letter templates, ICC templates.
I think you should add two things.
Go on.
There's two things, and this would answer your question. Two websites, palambassador.org and Palestine Remix. Palestine Remix, I don't work for Al Jazeera, but Al Jazeera did this. It's an entire database, a video database, any movies, any series, anything you need. And there's a 4-part Nakba documentary. It's your go-to. You want to learn how this started? Watch that. So Palestine Remix is very important. Pal Ambassador is a free online course for anyone who wants to learn about the Palestinian issue. And at the end of it, you get awarded a Pal Ambassador badge. And it means you now have the responsibility to go and spread the message and teach people and let them take the course as well. It's free.
So I was just going to say, thank you. Send me the links. Those will be on How to Help Gaza. Linktree, How to Help Gaza. Very straightforward.
There's just one additional thing I was just going to say. I think building on Abdurrahman's point, it's your responsibility. I think, I can't remember who said it, someone in a talk yesterday or the day before mentioned how you should wake up every morning and think, this week my mission is to speak to 5 people or 10 people at work, in the home, in school, in wherever it is, in university, and just talk to them about Palestine. So you're passing on that message. Every single one of you should be an enabler, a vessel for the Palestinian cause, and that's one thing I would add.
Thank you very much to the panel. And thank you all for being here. I'm so sorry. I've been told a few times that we've actually run out of time. So I'm really sorry I know there were so many more questions. And I think it was important that we gave them the time because they've made all the effort to come here to share their experiences. The one thing I would say is let's not forget, we do what we can with our hands. And if we can't, we use our words. And if we can't, we use our hearts. So we've got that connection. We've got that direct line to God. So we can do something, all of us. Doesn't matter our faith or where our beliefs is. We can all do that. So I want to just give them all a massive round of applause. Thank you very much, and I'm so sorry for those that I couldn't get you to ask the questions. There is a break right now, and Shireen was going to take over. Shireen.
And also a massive round of applause for Rukiyah as well for doing a brilliant job. Brothers and sisters, we are taking a break and we will be back here at 8:45. We need to be very prompt. So get yourself some food, stretch your legs, toilet breaks, whatever you need. But 8:45, I really do need you seated and ready for the next part. Thank you.